started?
It's on.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now your attention please. We'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the first in a series of lectures and symposium sponsored by Mesilot, the Society for the Advancement of Religious Zionism, and TOP, the Torah Outreach Project, which will go on for several months. We will have many speakers and different interesting personalities from the State of Israel and from outside delivering the various lecture and participating in the various symposia. My name is Rabbi Yitzchak Pessin. I'm the Secretary General of the World Movement of Mizrahi Apol Mizrahi, the World Religious Zionist Movement. These lectures and symposium are taking place here in Bet Meir. This building is called Bet Meir, which is the headquarters of the World Organization of the Religious Zionist Movement, Mizrahi Apol Mizrahi. And if you look around the room, there are pictures of many of the leaders of religious Zionism over the last 80 years, or actually a little more than 80 years, since the foundation of the religious Zionist movement. And frankly, we could go into that could be a separate lecture in itself, or a future lecture, as to who the various people are. They are leaders of the religious Zionist movement, founders of the religious Zionist movement, founders and leaders of the Center for Religious Education in the State of Israel, and we can go on and on. But just one or two words about the religious Zionist movement, and then we'll get to our speaker for this evening, Rabbi Fogelman. The religious Zionist movement was founded some 87 years ago in 1902. Most of what we see of religion in the State of Israel today is because of the religious Zionist movement, the Mizrahi movement. Unfortunately, we're lacking in public relations. Public relations meaning the people knowing that what they see and what is being done because of the religious Zionist movement. And just a couple of simple examples. There are today almost 100 moshavim, settlements in the State of Israel that were founded and that are part of the Igud HaMoshavim, the Moshavim section of Hapoel Mizrahi in Israel. There are 140,000 members of Hapoel Mizrahi, of the Kupat Cholim of Hapoel Mizrahi. You know, you're all members of Kupat Cholim, of the General Kupat Cholim. If you're a member of the General Kupat Cholim through Hapoel Mizrahi, you're a member of the religious Zionist movement of Hapoel Mizrahi. On the other hand, you might be a member of the General Kupat Cholim, which provides exactly the same services, and then you're a member of the Histadrut, which is part of the Labor Party. The Mizrahi Hapoel Mizrahi is part of the National Religious Party. All of this religious education, the public school, religious public school education, is sponsored and was originally part of the Mizrahi movement, and then the government took it over. And in this building, we also have the Center for Religious Education, which assists all of these religious public schools, the religious public school system in the State of Israel. There are 17 religious kibbutzim in the State of Israel, all part of the religious Zionist movement. There's a bank, the United Mizrahi Bank, that has been sponsored by the religious Zionist movement. There's a publishing company, the Moreshet Publishing Company in Tel Aviv. There's the building company called Mishav. There's the youth movement of Bnei Akiva. There's the young adult movement of Lishmeret Hatzirah. I've only mentioned, the tip of the iceberg. I can go on. There's a newspaper. There's one religious daily newspaper in the State of Israel that's called Hatzofer, and that's the religious Zionist, the National Religious Zionist newspaper. So these are just a few of the things and activities that we have, and I haven't mentioned the women's movement, which I'm sure you all know, Emunah, the American women's movement, Amit, and Emunah is a world movement. There are Emunah branches in 24 different countries around the world. We are members of the World Zionist Organization. We're vital members of the World Zionist Organization. In fact, in the last World Zionist Congress, which was held some 2 years ago, several proposals were brought up. I would call them anti-Orthodox proposals, and because of us, they didn't go through. They were tabled. Most of what you see in terms of religion in the State of Israel, even the religious laws in the State of Israel, the chief rabbinate, is because of the Mizrahi movement, the religious Zionist movement. Now, frankly, this night's lecture is not about Mizrahi and the religious Zionist movement, but it's just a small introduction And perhaps over coming lectures, we'll just get a little more information each time. And without further ado, we'd like to introduce the speaker for this evening, Rabbi Yaakov Fogelman. Please.
Our topic is Zionism and Judaism in the 1990s. In a certain way, it may not be a legitimate topic because the 1990s are really of no significance to us. The fact that it's 1889 or 1989 or 1890 or 1990 has no special Jewish significance. It's not our calendar. Nevertheless, I thought, as the whole world at this time takes stock, as they enter their 1990s, so in a time of stock taking, it's most appropriate that the viewpoint of the kingdom of priest and holy nation of the Jewish people who are to guide the world be expressed. An overview of reality. The world is now going through very big changes. Right now, the mightiest empire, which we thought might destroy the world, seems to be disintegrating, voluntarily disintegrating. Russia and its satellites are in such crises, economic, social, political, that they already just want to bail out. They're not so worried now about controlling the whole world. In the light of this, the state of Israel may undergo very, very profound changes. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of Soviet Jews may come to Israel. So 1990, while it's not of any special meaning to us in our calendar as a year, we're already at 5750, well into it. Still, it is a time of great significance for the Jewish people and the state of Israel. And at this time, I thought it'd be appropriate to review, indeed, where we're at and where we're going. The purpose of my lecture is to set the theoretical structure. What is the state of Israel all about? What is the Jewish people all about? And what is the Torah all about? Next Sunday afternoon, Rabbi Gedalia Gorfine of the Israelite program will speak on Stage 2 Spiritual Zionism. The following Sunday, Rabbi Natan Lopez Cardozo of Yeshivat Or Sameach will speak on whose land is it? The problem we have now with the Arabs as to who has a right to this land which we call Israel, to part or all. Okay? That's our schedule. So I'll begin. What does Bereshis have to do with the Jews? Anybody?
Oh, I know. Because Rashi says that it starts with God creating the world to show that God did create the world. It belongs to Him, and He can give it to whom, portions of it to whom He wishes. And thank God He gave this portion to the Jewish people.
Why doesn't He say so? Why doesn't God say in the beginning He created heaven and earth and gave Israel to the Jews? Rashi says it sets the underpinnings for a right to the Jews to have the land. God gives it to them. You have to say God made it. But in the beginning, it doesn't mention it. What is the Jewish connection on the surface, reading the text of Sedra Bereshit, of the beginning of the Torah? What does it say about the Jews in Parshat Bereshit? Genesis 1, Genesis 2. Noah. Let's go on even. Genesis and Noah. Are the Jews or the land of Israel mentioned?
No.
And that's the basis.
No, not till after.
Not at all. So what might that indicate to you? It might indicate that the Jews are not the only thing in the universe, and perhaps not even the major thing. Some say yes, some say no. In other words, we don't have Jews, we don't have Israel until when? When is there anything Jewish for the first time in the Torah?
Avraham Na'ivri.
All right, when does Avram come into the Torah? Which of our readings?
When he leaves his
land.
His land.
What's that parsha called? Lech Lecha. What parsha is that in the Torah?
It's a Bereshit.
Yeah, but which week? It's the third. We have Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha. So the first two portions of the Torah mention nothing about Jews and nothing whatsoever about the land of Israel. So what is their subject? There's no laws, there's no Jews and no Israel. What is the subject?
Creation of the world.
That
Because
takes-
there has to be a world to show you that there is a world where Jews would be living. If there is no creation,
There's creation of the world. That doesn't take so long. There's more space given to the matchmaking of Eliezer for Yitzchak than there is to the creation of the whole world. The creation of the whole world we read very quickly, the whole 7 days. It's not much. Is there anything Jewish about it? What would our Meisharim friends answer?
The concentration of the world?
Yes. What would our Meisharim friends answer? Shabbos!
Shabbos!
Okay. So there is an element, very interesting. There is an element in the story of Bereshit, of creation itself, which is most Jewish, which is the inheritance of the Jewish people. The seventh day, God ceased creating, got back to his soul, so to speak, and that institution called the Shabbat disappears from universal mankind and is only kept alive and brought out in its full implication and experience by the Jewish people later. What else is there in creation which is Jewish? So it's not looking so bad already. We have Shabbos, which is also why the Ten Commandments really have nothing to do with the Gentiles. They like to say the Ten Commandments is the universal religion. It's not true. Our universal religion is the 7 laws of the sons of Noah. The Ten Commandments is Jewish. Shabbos!
you have the Brit of Abraham.
The Brit of Abraham is later. That's Avram already. But in Bereshit and Noach, what is Jewish besides Shabbos? I would say 2 other things.
I can't remember kashrut.
Kashrut, yes. Where's kashrut come
When
in?
Noah had to bring the animals to the ark.
He has clean animals, right? He has the concept of kosher or clean animals, only they being fit for sacrifice. Such a concept, again, is lost by universal man. But the Jewish people perpetuate it, right? Jewish people bring out that concept of kosher meat and slaughter and sacrifice to its full potential. Speaking of kashrus, what's God's only commandment? Negative commandment to universal man? In Bereshit? I'm sorry? Eating, before that, a certain fruit is treif. The first commandment is not to meditate, is not to pray, is not to sing. The first commandment is a certain fruit you may not eat. This idea of the connection to God, starting with the voluntary restraining of the animal impulse, a very Freudian idea. The curbing or channeling of the primal drives in order to somehow surpass man-mammal is found in the beginning with the prohibition on the treif of fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. What other Jewish element? Yes?
I was going to say, with Noah now, nothing actually happened until after Noah.
Yes, but I'm sure
from
some
the
things are
day
there.
of Noah. That's when the Jewish...
Right, but we're
basically,
suggesting now is there are Jewish elements in the universe and universal man, which universal man loses, and the Jew then brings back. I suggest there's one more. There's one big element found in Bereshit, which is very Jewish, and is lost by universal man, and brought back by the state of Israel. If I were to describe major features of the state of Israel, culturally, sociologically, what's one of the most interesting ones which we violate at this moment?
Men and women sitting together.
Oh, that's
At this very moment or at this
At
moment?
this very moment, we're violating one of the great accomplishments of the state of Israel. Huh?
How about Israel?
Well, we all like each other. We're all nice people here. What are we ignoring?
Now here,
A little mitzvah we're ignoring. A little mitzvah. In Pirkei Avot, it says, Hevei, let a small mitzvah be like a big mitzvah in your eyes. And the Rambam, Maimonides, gives an example of a small mitzvah. What is it? To speak Hebrew. Okay. So a foundation of all creation, the very force from which all creation emerges, is the Hebrew language. It's words, permutations of letters in the Hebrew language. Yehior. God does not speak French. God does not speak German. God does not even speak Yiddish, leave alone English. God says Yehior. So the Hebrew language is the mode, the vehicle by which God starts the forces of nature working. And the Hebrew language is that which man, while he still retains a developed image of God, speaks. He calls his wife Chava, the mother of all flesh, the nurturing gesture, Em Kol Chai. He gives the animals names. His name is Adam, Kimin Adama, for from the earth he is taken. So the Hebrew language is a fundamental cornerstone of all reality as we experience it, and it's only sustained and developed and perpetuated by the Jewish people in the land of Israel via the state of Israel. This is proclaimed the year of the Hebrew language, so it's most appropriate that that figures in our lecture today. My subject is the Torah, Zionism, and Messianic Judaism. So we've discussed now a little bit the Torah. We'll come back to the Torah in a minute. The Torah we're defining in its most basic sense now as the 5 books of Moses given by God to Moses on Sinai in the desert and so forth. That's the Torah. What's Zionism? How would you define Zionism? We are in the world's center of religious Zionism, Bet Meir. How would you define Zionism?
coming to Jerusalem.
Coming to Jerusalem, to Israel. Did that happen in the 1300s? Yes, some. Did it happen in the 300s? Some.
Come to Israel to be your own rulers, not to be.
And to be your rulers. 2 components. That the Jewish people, every single man, woman, and child, should live in the land of Israel, and that they should rule the state of Israel. Why do you need that second component? Practically, without it, you won't have the first. If the Jews don't rule Israel, the Jews will not be able to live in Israel or even visit the wall. As we all knew between 1948 and 1967. As we all knew under the Turks, under the British with their white papers.
Abraham was the first Zionist.
Yes, we'll come to him. So we've defined the Torah, we've defined Zionism. That the Jews should live in the state of Israel, the land of Israel, and should rule it via the state of Israel. And what is Messianic Judaism as opposed to regular Judaism? How would you define Messianic Judaism?
We're waiting
When
for
the Mashiach will come.
The Mashiach's already here.
All right, that's
In
what
the
the
time
Christians
of
believe, that we don't
Mashiach.
care about. But Messianic Judaism is that which has a very strong Messianic consciousness. What's a Messianic consciousness mean? Waiting for the Messiah, for the Messianic age. And what's supposed to happen in that Messianic age? We just have a better supply of kosher food, no unemployment. What's supposed to happen?
All Jews will be together.
All Jews will come back to Israel, and what else? And they'll make chant happily ever after.
No, what's happening now, that the whole world will be turned upside down, and there will be an
Will we
era of
turn,
peace.
not upside down, but downside up?
Yeah, right side up.
Right side up, thank you. All right?
Well, it's upside down right now.
Right now it's upside down. So Messianic Judaism which I hold myself a strong propounder of. I'm a Messianic Jew. A Messianic Jew.
It's the term you should use.
Oh, it's the term we should use and keep the phonies from using.
Yeah, well,
They're
that's how people associate it.
I know, that's exactly the error I'm trying to correct today. I consider myself fully a Messianic Jew. All the Chabadniks are Messianic Jews. Rabbi Riskin, I would say, is a Messianic Jew. Rabbi Cook was a Messianic Jew. Rabbi Soloveitchik is a Messianic Jew. All those Jews who don't look at the Jewish religion as just some sort of set of rules or game for the Jews, but as the means by which the whole world, with all its present undeveloped potential, with all its rottenness, shiches, will be transformed into the world where the lion and the lamb are together, where man shall no longer live sword to another man, where they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and where everyone will speak Hebrew. So a Messianic Jew, as I define it, is a Jew who sees all that he is doing in every moment of his religious life, of his Torah life and of his Israeli life, of his Judaism and his Zionism, as being the means to make the whole world get back in shape and return to the Garden of Eden. Okay? So those are my three topics: the Torah, Zionism, and Messianic Judaism in its finest sense.
You know, to summarize the Messianic Judaism, that's just what all these guys, I don't know.
Fine, but they have nothing to do with Judaism.
To get out the message.
Yeah.
Basically,
We do believe...
That's what we're supposed to do, to give it out to the
Correct.
Gentile world.
Correct. Yeah. We are definitely supposed to get out the message, and thank you for adding that. Another part of being a Messianic Jew is that we don't believe it's enough if we ourselves live in Israel and observe the Torah, but we care that every other Jew in the world should come to the state of Israel and observe the whole Torah, and we care that every human being, Jew or non-Jew, should be able to come back to the essence of the human being and to God, and to fully join us in this venture, not as Jews, but as B'nai Noah, as sons of Noah, for whom the Torah provides their own simple yet deep religion. Okay, so now let's take the first part and see how it develops the rest, the Torah. We will briefly review the whole Torah, the whole 5 books of Moses at this point, and maybe pause a little by our present Parshat HaShavua. At this point, I prefer maybe comments at the end of this section. Okay? Excuse me. Religious Zionists make good tea also. Okay. We start out, as I mentioned, without a Jew in sight. There's universal man, Adam and Eve, alone with God. God gives them a world with no problems. They have to work and guard the garden. Taking the text in its simple literal sense, one fruit is treif, that's their only restriction, and they can bask in God's presence, and they are image of God. They don't look like animals. No one could ever dream that they came from a monkey. They are image of God. What happens? They don't want it. The little kid has a wonderful home. His parents are very nice. He has a beautiful life. But he'd like to do his own thing. So the kid threatens you, I'm going to run away from home. I'm never going to come back. And you ask him, is that a promise? And off he goes. But you still keep his room ready, just in case. You're hoping he will come back. Adam and Eve, according to Reb Soloveitchik, do not want God's secluded world of Garden of Eden, of Gan Eden. Adam and Eve want to go out and do their own thing. The snake tells them God's doing all this to make your life restricted. It's as though he's forbidding everything to you, the one restriction. So God, in effect, says, Geg is unter. You want to leave? Leave. And they do. But God puts the angels with the flaming sword, the cherubim, outside the path to the tree of life, to guard it, to preserve it. Why? Why must the angels guard or preserve the path to the tree of life? Not to keep man out, but it should still be there when man's ready to come back to it. The Torah is a tree of life. And the person who is deeply enough involved in the Torah, in every sense, enters Gan Eden, partakes of the tree of eternity, while his very body is dying. He's in eternal space. When people would dance and sing as they went into the gas chambers of the Germans, they were having Eitz Chaim, even though they were dying. All right, man goes out and does his own thing. How does mankind start off? With two tragedies. One is the eating of the treif of fruit, of the non-kosher fruit. That is a sin, basically, of pleasure, of unbridled pleasure. It's pretty, looks good to eat. That's the arguments which move Eve to eat it and give some to Adam. Misery loves company. And she eats it. It's a sin of passion. What's the next sin? Cain and Abel. That's not a sin of tava, of passion. That's a sin of ga'ava, of pride and aggression, and wanting to be on top of the other one, and beat him, and control him, and rule him. So individual man, in his quest for freedom, goes into pleasure trips and power trips. After individual man does this, mankind multiplies. Skills are acquired as man does his own thing. And mass societies arise. What is the peak of the first mass society, of the first 10 generations of universal man on his own? Where does that peak?
At Babel.
No, at the flood. The flood is the 10th generation. God waits 10 generations from Adam to Noah. And then comes the flood. The flood is basically Adam and Eve gone public. A whole world gets absorbed in pleasures. Ki shchizko basar estarko al haaretz. All flesh corrupts its way upon the earth. Bodily pleasure, bodily corruption and perversion. The net result, God is patient. But when the net result becomes Hamas, violence, but it's not that they're violent people. The drug addict who attacks an elderly woman to take her money may be a very nice person, but he's caught in the throes of his pleasure quest. They're not nasty people, but they're, pleasure-driven people. That's the flood generation. What is the next peak of universal mankind? Dor HaFlaga, the tower generation, Babylon. What happens then? It's on the contrary. It's not a pleasure-oriented society at all. It's a power-oriented society. It's a society of collective man where individual personality is ignored. Everybody wears the same uniform. They all wear black coats and black hats, or they all wear red coats and red hats, whatever the particular society makes its mold. And they build a tower to conquer God himself. Collective man becomes the goal. Power and achievement and 5-year plans. They're not pleasure man.
But they
They're
were
power.
unified.
I'm sorry?
They were unified.
They were unified, but they used their unity as a thing against God. Very interesting. Reb Soloveitchik says, this is the pattern of universal mankind. We have just gone through the first 2 portions of the Torah, and in those 2 portions of the Torah, that's the pattern. Pleasure man society, which becomes weak and washes itself out, floods, overtaken by a power man society, which goes crazy in the struggle to worship collective man as the thing which transcends individual life, which they know is fallible and frail. In other words, man knows he's weak. Man knows he's helpless. So either he can have an egomaniacal power trip, or he can recognize his only powers to join with God, or he can worship collective man. Reb Soloveitchik said the world continues that way from the time of Genesis, of Bereshit, up till today to 1990. And the world keeps going back and forth. After the pleasure man generation is washed out, the power man, puritanical generation takes over. Today, the Eastern Bloc is the power man, Russia, China. There's not much pleasure there. There's not much fun. There's no decadence. But instead of decadence, there's a bland blunting of individuality. Man becomes part of collective man, and the essence is power and 5-year plans and conquest of the world and conquest of space. The Russian cosmonaut says, I don't see God there. While the American astronaut says, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. There's two worlds. But the Western world is much caught, let's hope it will survive and escape it, is very much caught in the pleasure mad syndrome. Be it Europe, be it the United States, South Africa, wherever. The Western world is caught in pleasure absorption, overabsorption. So then along, Lech Lecha comes Avram. God changes tactics. God no longer works directly only on universal man, but sets up a model man. Who's chosen to be the model man? Avram. Avram. Why is Avram chosen? Because he seeks God. Noah is not Avram. Noah is not chosen. Noah remains universal man. Noah remains the good Vermonter. To whom does Noah relate? Who is Noah's God? What does he call his God? What is the God of Noah called? With whom does Noah walk?
With God.
In Hebrew. Elohim. Noah does not relate to Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Noah relates to Elohim. What does that mean? Elohim is the Lord of nature. It equals 86 in Gematria, which equals Hateva in Hebrew, nature. Noah is the good Vermonter, the person who has a sense of natural harmony and decency, and he doesn't go to pleasure excesses and power excesses. But it's all an impersonal set of laws and rules to him. He doesn't care, apparently, about other people that much. He doesn't see God as love and kindness and human feeling. He sees God as a set of beautiful, rational rules to which he must adapt. It's something. It's a lot. He's the only one who survived in the world which did not recognize that. Avram, though, has a different thing. He's on fire with love for man and love for truth and love for God. Avram doesn't just relate to Hashem, to Elohim rather, to the Lord as the God of impersonal nature. But Avram relates to Hashem, the Lord of infinite mercy, the Lord of relationship. And he cares about others. Avram passionately pleads for Sodom and Gomorrah. God's about to destroy Las Vegas, and Avram starts an argument with God. Very interesting. What does Avram care about Las Vegas? The Satmar Rebbe's doctor asked the Satmar Rebbe, how can you so horribly attack the Zionist movement in the state of Israel? Avram even prayed for Sodom and Gomorrah, the worst of the worst, the lowest of the low. The Satmar Rebbe turned to him and he said, you don't know what Avram said to them. In other words, he's saying, sure, we pray and hope God will be good to the state of Israel, but he feels his job is to cuss them out. And even though Avram prayed for Sodom and Gomorrah, Avram might have cussed them out also. Of course, where I disagree strongly with the Satmar Rebbe is the net effect of his cussing out is not to make anybody better, just to make them dislike the religious and the Torah. I think he's 100% wrong. But that's the point he made. Okay. So Avram goes out, and the first thing God tells him, and now we'll shift from Torah to Zionism. God tells him, Lech Lecha. He doesn't tell him who he is, doesn't say hello, nothing. Avram's sitting there, 75 years old, he has all this God stuff in his head, but no tangible appearances to confirm his hypothesis. All of a sudden, a voice comes out of the sky, get out! I'll see you over there, V'shamareka. Like a couple on a honeymoon, they go to this magnificent hotel, and the groom sees cobwebs and mold under the beds. And he says, let's go out. Better we'll spend our honeymoon a little later in a simpler but more wholesome place. God says, leave civilized Babylonia and go to the place which I will show you. It's indescribable. The essence of Israel is unique and can only be known if you're here. So Avram goes here, and here God appears to him, just as he said. So the first thing in this mission to bring universal man back to God through a model is Abraham's becoming a Zionist. In the very basis of Zionism, our very basic claim to this land from Avraham Avinu is that this is the place where God appears to you. And Messianic Judaism, what does God say? And all the nations of the earth will be blessed in you from this place. You're not just doing this for some kind of over-Jewing it Jewish trick. You are doing this so that every nation in the world will be blessed through you, through this land. So we now have at this point of Avraham already, Torah, Zionism, and Messianic Judaism. Avraham, according to Kabbalah, develops the aspect of man called chesed, the man who seeks to develop himself by relating to everything and everyone outside of himself, to know and influence a million people, to relate to every phenomenon, the curious, outgoing, exploring person, the David HaMelech Shlomo Karbakian personality. That's called chesed in Kabbalah. He half succeeds. One son who's just like him with chesed, Yishmael, uses that chesed to buy and sell and eat and drink and wine and pinch women in the shuk. That's Yishmael. That son is the spitting image of Avraham in personality, but the opposite value system. He's the value system of Adam and Eve eating the apple. He's the value system of the flood generation. It's Yitzchak who is the next model. Yitzchak is the opposite. Yitzchak is not called chesed in Kabbalah. What is Yitzchak called? Does anyone know? Gevura. What's Gevura? Ezo Gibor, who is a mighty man, hakoveshet yitzro, he who conquers his own inclination. And he has two sons. He doesn't go around preaching, making altars, calling in the name of God like Avraham did. Yitzchak does not do that. Yitzchak is quiet. Yitzchak is introvert. Yitzchak also works on himself, but by deeply being sensitive and analytical of everything that goes on inside of himself, and building up orderly structures of thought and discipline and morality and closeness to God. He's the quiet farmer, not the singing shepherd. That's Yitzchak. Yitzchak has two kids, Yaakov and Esav. The kid who's like him, whom he likes, is Esav. Esav is Gevura, but not the Gevura of self-conquest, but that Gevura which repeats the sins of Cain and Abel and the tower generation. That Gevura which seeks to conquer others and aggrandize, and self-aggrandize. And that son is just like his father, but the values are carried out by Yaakov. Yaakov initially starts out relating to Avraham. God appears to him as he leaves this week. Parshat Vayetze, Yaakov leaves and has a dream, and God says, I am the God of your father. What's the next word? Avraham. And the God of Yitzchak. At this point, Yaakov relates to Avraham. Yitzchak is really
Is a link.
not too relevant. Just the link between Avraham and Yaakov. But toward the end of his life, Yaakov appreciates Yitzchak. Because Yaakov's job is to synthesize chesed and gevura to form tiferet, glory, or emet, truth, which will synthesize external relative qualities and internal introspective and depth qualities. And then he becomes Yisrael, so Yaakov completes the process by which God creates model man as an example for all humanity to come back to where they once were in the Messianic era of the Garden of Eden with God. The problem with Yaakov, Yisrael as a natural model, is that man does not live as an individual naturally. He naturally, biologically lives as a family. He has a wife and has children. So in order to have the model for mankind complete, it is not sufficient to have model man, but you must have model family. And the rest of the book of Bereshit, the book of creation, and not recreation, but re-creation, the Jewish people's recreation of creation as it was supposed to be before man messed up the world, is the story of the development of Yaakov's family, which almost kills each other and has terrible crises and tragedies and sadness. But in the end, they all shape up. Yaakov doesn't lose any son to the mission. And they form 12 tribes of Israel. And they're just a family in Bereshit, which will be models for the various personality syndromes composing mankind. And the 70 souls which go down with Yaakov to Egypt are models for the 70 basic cultures, the 70 languages which form all of humanity, post-Babylonian humanity.
Wasn't Abraham and Sarah more the model of the family than Yaakov?
No, because they lost a son. At least Avram lost a son. Avram lost Yishmael. So, and they had just one child. All right? So we end the Sefer Bereshis. You understand that now. We don't end it with when they get down to Egypt. They're down in Egypt for the last couple portions of Genesis and Bereshis. We end with Yaakov's family getting back in shape with each other, because only then can they do their mission to all of mankind. The next book, which the Sefer Halachot Gedolot calls Sefer Sheni, Volume 2, which we call Exodus, that book is the transformation and growth of that family into not perhaps a natural entity, but a sociological entity called a nation. Since mankind unites not just in the biological natural entity of families, but in a sociological entity called nations, so in order to bring them back, God has to take that model family, which came from that model individual, and forge it into a nation. And the story of Shemot of Exodus is the story of the Jewish family becoming a Jewish nation and having a national definition which is independent of their territory in a certain sense. It's both Zionist and non-Zionist. They go out of Egypt to become Zionist, but God gives them their nationhood in Egypt and defines it as soon as they get out. What is the definition of the Jewish nation? Exodus 19:6. Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kodosh. A kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So that kingdom of priests and holy nation, it's not enough to be in the kollel, to be with God, because then they're not an example for humanity. Those kollel boys at a certain time in their life have to go out and take charge of the world, otherwise the world will never get better. So they have to take the kingdom of priests and make it into a holy nation. That's our ideal of Torah, im derech eretz, of Torah with the way of the earth. And that's, in our past parsha of Toldot, the fight between Rivka and Yitzchak. You think Yitzchak doesn't appreciate Yaakov? He does. But he says like this, Reb Soloveitchik said, Yaakov is a yeshiva bacher, Ishtam Yoshev Olim, so be it. Esav is Nish Sadeh, so be it. Esav will work on 47th Street, finagle with diamonds, Ramat Gan, and he'll support Yaakov. He'll even give Meiser from the salt, from the melech. That's Esav's role. Render unto Caesars and all that stuff. That's Yitzchak's idea. What's Rivka's idea? The little Bat Shuvah from Las Vegas, from Padan Aram, she knows what happens to a world when it's run by the Esavs, by the Betuels, by the Lavans, instead of the Yaakov Yisraels. And her idea is that Yaakov, who is an Ishtam, but he was never called an Ish Yoshev Ohalim. Esav is Ish Sadeh. He's a roamer and a rover. He'll never be deep and holy. But Yaakov doesn't have to sit in tents. He just does that as the first stage of his development. But that same Yaakov is not going to go out and learn in the school of hard knocks to learn the ropes from Uncle Noah. And he will come back to be called Yisrael. This is not going to happen while he stays in the tents of Torah. And then the world's to be really transformed. So we see in this early stages of Bereshis and Shemot already Torah, Zionism, must have a model land and a holy land, a place where you experience God to become a Mamlechet Kohanim, and only there will you be able to make your Goy Kodosh a nation which in every normal aspect of national life, medicine, army, agriculture, everything, will show something different, something holy, something transcendent. Will show Hashem, the God of relationship and holiness, behind the seemingly impersonal Elohim, the God of nature. And that's the goal of every Jew and the Jewish people as a whole. Our culmination of the whole year is after we finish Ne'ilah and Meir on Yom Kippur. What do we say at the very end of Ne'ilah? Hashem Hu Elohim. That behind the impersonal God of nature, there is a permeation of the God of transcendence and love and infinity. Okay, so we have 2 of the 5 books of the Torah already. Then, it's very nice, we have the goal, a kingdom of priests and the holy nation, but how do you do it? So the book of Vayikra, basically, is Torah Kohanim, as David Hoffman puts it. That is the book which gives all the rules of every aspect of life of how to be a kingdom of priests and the holy nation. It's the law book, it's the rule book. the Torah of the Kohanim, of the priests to mankind, Mamlechet Kohanim. Much of it does not deal with the sons of Aaron, the Kohanim of the Kohanim. It deals with the people of Israel as a whole. Love your neighbor as yourself, weights and measures, all the laws of Vayikra. Fine. We have the people, we have the Constitution, we have the national purpose and identity. What's lacking? To do it. The book of Bamidbar in the desert is symbolic and a prelude of the long desert of history, where the Jewish people tried to do this, tried to be a kingdom of priests in a holy nation, and they fall down plenty. And they do lots of sins, and they lose faith in their own mission. And at times they may seem worse than some of the other nations, but God never abandons them. They can make a golden calf and terrible things can happen, but God says, carry on. Unlike the Christian and Muslim claims that God changed his mind, God never changed his mind, as he said he would never change his mind. Until the Jewish people have accomplished the transformation of all of humanity, God will not leave them go. As he says to Yaakov as he's about to depart on his first experiment in exile, I will not forsake you until I have done that which I have spoken regarding you. Then we won't need special protection. The whole world will acknowledge us as their teachers. So after the failures of Bamidbar, we have a rehashing. The book of Devarim or Deuteronomy. In that book, what do? We review. It's the beginning of the Mishnah process, of the Talmudic process. That we review history, we review ourselves, we review the Torah, because we see we don't have it all together yet, and we're so far from it. So the book of Devarim, Mishnah Torah, as it's called, the repetition of the Torah, an analysis of the Torah, a learning of the Torah, is the beginning of the long thousands of years of process of learning and introspection and tshuva and prayer, which the Jewish people goes through. So the Bible, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, while historically may branch off into Joshua and later Jewish history, while it topically is a cycle and returns to Bereshit, because as I pointed out, this is the recreation process to bring man back to where he was in the Garden of Eden. The story of the death of Moses, because they have to remember that's the name of the game. We're Messianic Jews. We're going to transform the whole world. We're going to bring it back to where God wanted it to be. And in the third direction we take from Devarim is the Mishnah. What hour do we read the Shema? Is a continuation of the Mishnaic process initiated by Moses in Devarim. So that's a bit of a review of the whole Torah and how it interacts with Zionism, that the Jews should live in the land of Israel, rule it, and make it into a model nation, a kingdom of priests and a holy people, and Messianic Judaism. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah, devar Hashem Yerushalayim, that from Zion this Torah shall go forth, from Jerusalem. And we get into a problem which I think is very much relevant to the future discussions in this series of Judaism in the 90s, as to what is the universal aspect of Judaism and what is the particular aspect of Judaism. In order to be a good priest to mankind, sometimes we have to be away from mankind. Avraham takes his son on a symbolic sacrifice to Har HaMoriah, the site of the temple. He doesn't go alone. He takes with him, according to tradition, Eliezer and Yishmael. At a certain point, he sees the place and he says, Shavu lachem poem achamor, v'ani v'anar necha ko. I and the lad will go over there. Ko denotes a mystical realm throughout the Torah. Ko Amar Hashem. Ko 25 is Hanukkah Day, and so forth. The seeming conquest of the impossible by the Spirit. But he takes him with him. Reb Soloveitchik said, Avram knows he can't make it alone to Har HaMoriah to redeem mankind. He has to take the non-Jew Yishmael with him. Without the help of the United States at this moment, I don't think Israel could make it. That's how God set up history. Without the help of the not quite religious enough Jew, the one who isn't fit to carry on the covenant, Eliezer, without non-observant Jews, there'd be no Zionism, there'd be no Israel, there'd be no Mashiach. So Avram takes them with him. At a certain point of transcendental experience, he says, you wait with the chamor, the donkey, symbol of materialism. chumriut. I and the lad will go over there. We will come back to you. Someday we'll all be together. So Abraham is part of his society. He works with the not-religious Jew, and he's tolerant of them, and he's pleasant to them. And he works with the non-Jew, and he's tolerant of them and pleasant to him and helpful. Avram's a good citizen. He leads a war to rescue them from a crazy conqueror Nimrod. Even he rescues the corrupt kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. And his renegade yeshiva student who became the Reform Rabbi in Las Vegas, Lot. Avram risks his life to save them. Avram is a prince of God among us, as the B'nai Ches call him. But what does Avram say to them? Ger v'toshav anochi machem. I am a stranger and a settler with you. I am both. I am one of you. I share your concerns and problems. I'm a great citizen, maybe better than average. Much better. But at the same time, I'm a stranger. Why? Because we need separate burial for Sarah. Because man transcends this earthly existence. I'm a stranger and a settler in this earth itself. That's Avram's premise. That we're here on a temporary trip between eternities to redeem this world, to redeem ourselves. And as the story of the Chafetz Chaim, when the rich American tourist visited him in Radin, he saw the rabbi's modest hut with sticks of furniture. And he said, Rabbi, where's your furniture? And the rabbi looked at him and he said, where's yours? I'm on a trip. So am I. So that's part of the message of the Bible, that each human being, and the Jewish people are especially sensitive to this, is here on a brief trip between eternities. It can be a noble and beautiful and high trip, which will transform this world through which he passes, or it can be a rather ignoble trip, where he becomes less natural than nature itself, where he corrupts his way, where he's worse than the animals, lower than the animals. That's our challenge. And now that God has given us the opportunity, after 1900 years of exile, to again have a flourishing, rebuilt state of Israel, but only through the efforts of the Jewish people and its army and its agriculture. This is our challenge. Rev Kook wrote that the Jews of the last generations, the Jews of Eastern Europe, of the Arab countries, had too much spirit and too little body. A person could kill them, rape them, drive them out of their place. There was no bodily dignity, no basic human dignity. The early Zionist pioneers went to the opposite extreme. Everything was army and agriculture, and they didn't want religion on the surface. But their very act was an act of huge faith in God and Torah. It didn't make sense to come back to a land after 1900 years plagued by malaria, poverty, Arabs, not knowing any language in common. Hebrew had not been reborn. But what is the message? The land of Israel is holy. The Jewish people are holy. The Hebrew language is holy. They transcend all logical secular categories. No people could survive 1900 years of exile. They would disappear in a short time and assimilate. No land would remain a barren desert with no one able to establish a continuous presence here. There might be brief spurts of flourishing, but no continuous presence. No attachment to this land by any other people. The Torah predicts it. You'll be scattered all over the world. The land will remain deserted. No one will be really attached to it. And then one day you'll come back and it'll bloom. It doesn't make sense. From a secular standpoint, it's absurd. It's nonsense. Yet the early Zionists believed it before it came true. A language should revive. Languages have to grow naturally, slowly, organically. Once they're dead, except for scholarly or religious use, languages don't come back again. But a holy language breaks the rules and comes back again. So here we are, the holy people in the holy land, beginning to speak the holy tongue again, and about to redeem all humanity. And that's our challenge, I would say today, to merge Torah, Zionism, and true Messianic Judaism, that we should come to that day when God will be one in His name. Okay, that's the introduction to this subject. Next week, same time, same place, and pass the word so people will come. Rabbi Gedalia Gorfine will speak on stage 2, Spiritual Zionism. He's a very dynamic speaker, very, very nice person. He was once on Wall Street, and his subtitle is A Personal Odyssey from Wall Street to the Wall. Okay? And the third lecture of this month will be given by Rabbi Natan Lopez Cardozo, a Dutch Jewish philosopher, brilliant man. On Whose Land Is It?, where he explores Jewish and other arguments as to who has the right to control the land of Israel. So tell everybody, and that's it for today, except, as I put in the ad, for questions and comments. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I think you gave an excellent talk.
Thank you.
Me too, I'll say the same thing.
I wish more people had heard it, and I'm sure if they did, you'll have people up in the records.
All right, so start. Thank God. All starts are difficult.
What do you mean exactly? I mean, what is he the focus on spiritualism?
Just that. I think it may take off on what I've said today, that now the early Zionist goals have been achieved. There is an army, there is a flourishing agriculture industry, we have a Jewish state. The next stage is, once the little baby eats and drinks and goes to the bathroom okay, you got to educate him. You got to give him the spirit and soul. And I believe that will basically be his topic for next week. And any other questions or
What
comments?
do these people that, for instance, I think you mentioned the Satmar and even those other strange people, the Natura Carta, that think that apparently that God will just bring down a whole new temple. What do they think when they see what's happening now and the unmistakable signs of a sort of a messianic reawakening? How do they approach that? And what is
Well,
their
they
thinking
say
about that?
it's all going to self-destruct. The Satmar Rebbe predicted it would only last 40 years, and so forth. They feel if there's so much wrong with it, it can't be good and better to do nothing. That's their philosophy. Reb Soloveitchik once said, he can hear both sides theoretically. Rav Kook says, this is the beginning of the Messianic process, and we're just at the beginning. You don't expect everything to happen at once. First, you got to get a body, then you can get a soul. Very simply. And it'll take some time, but thank God we're on the way. The Satmar people and so forth say, no, if it has so much rotten with it, and it does. The cheap discotheques in Tel Aviv, and Rehova Yarkon, and Eilat, and so forth. There's much that's the opposite of the Torah spirit in our society, and shoving on buses and yelling and screaming and so forth. So they say, better not happen. So Reb Soloveitchik says, how does he decide who is right? He says like this, in every age, there are people, Amalek, the Torah tells us, never forget Amalek. There are people who wish to destroy the Jewish nation. They wish to obliterate our whole mission. Each age, they know better than we sometimes what item will cause us to end our mission. One age, they forbade learning of the Torah. In another age, Hasmonean and Hanukkah period, they forbade circumcision. We have an excellent short drama at our video center on that subject called The Eighth Day. Another age, they tried to spoil our Pesach by the blood libel. They forbade Shabbat. They forbade New Moon. Today, in the 20th century, nobody cares if you're religious. They sense that's not where our salvation is coming from at the moment. The one thing they hate is Zionism, the political state of Israel. Those who kill Jewish children, they say, we have nothing against the Jews. We just don't want a state of Israel. And therefore, Reb Soloveitchik said, if the enemies of the Jewish people hate Zionism so much and so irrationally, that's the best sign to him that the Satmar Rebbe is 100% wrong and Rav Kook is 100% right. That our enemies sense that this is the thing that's going to bring them Mashiach. Yes.
The New Age movement is strictly against all religions, against God, period.
Yeah, but that's not our main...
Positively, and so no jokes about it. I wish our own people here would start to realize what's going on.
Our main problem in the world today, from an Israeli perspective, is the violent hatred of Zionism. Yes?
You want a beautiful example, and just to show you that the whole Bible is example for us, what our ancestors were when you said that we need America now, just as Abraham needed Ishmael and Eliezer. This is really...
Rabbi Blech of Oceanside, New York, made an incredible lecture.
This is really...
Rabbi Blech said, we've had two absolutely mind-blowing events in our time. One of them is the Holocaust, and the other is the State of Israel. How do we respond to them? We look in the Torah. The Holocaust basically ended and became the focus of the world's attention in 1945, the Hebrew year 5705. The State of Israel was created in 1948, the Hebrew year 5708. He counted the Pesukim in the Torah. And as he counted them, Pasuk number 5705, which would somehow correlate with the year of reflection on the Holocaust, 1945, says, the secret things are to the Lord our God, and the known things are for us to do like all this Torah. We have to do all according to the Torah. We have to set up our holy nation, our kingdom of priest and holy nation. And the real meaning of the Holocaust is beyond our comprehension. The secret things are to the Lord our God. We come to Pasuk 5708, Deuteronomy 30, verse 3. And God shall gather you back from all over the earth and bring you back to it. Any other questions or
It was
comments?
very good because I don't like when people always try to, they know why the Holocaust took place.
Yeah.
No one knows.
We can't know. You can guess any way you want. The Satmar guys will say it was because of the Zionists. The Zionist guys will say it's because the Satmars weren't Zionists. If they don't come to Israel, it would have been fine. It's very hard to say. Reb Soloveitchik in the book Chamesh Drashot makes one observation. He says, Joseph represents the religious Zionist movement, the one whose dreams and visions of the future are different from the other brothers. And the other brothers try to kill him and do everything terrible to him. He says, but what's the difference? In the Bible, the brothers in the end realized they were wrong and Joseph was right. After seeing the Holocaust in the state of Israel, it's time that the pupils of the anti-Zionist rabbis should, like the rabbis themselves would have done where they were alive, say that they made a mistake.
They don't see, they say,
Yeah.
how could God, how could he done this to small children? Where was he?
So this is the secret things unto the Lord our God.
The woman lost her husband, so what?
On the other hand, the outstandingly terrible things that happen to the Jews are also signs that we're under some kind of special divine plan and not normal. Not Elohim, not just the laws of nature. Any other comments or questions? That's it.
Thank you.
Same time, same station next week. Please spread the word. We'll have posters available. There are Parsha sheets outside.
If you have some, if you got some small handbills, we could put piles in the hotels. Don't you think Americans would come and listen? If there are any tourists around, which I think